Sometimes the most painful moments in life are not the ones we expect, not the ones that come with warning, but the ones that catch us completely off guard. For Demet Özdemir, that moment arrived in silence, in an ordinary setting, and yet it changed everything. With just one glance, with one image burned into her memory, she felt her entire world freeze. "I saw him with someone else, and I froze." These are not lines from a script. These are Demet's own words, raw, emotional, and devastating. For years, fans speculated about the connection between Demet and Can Yaman. On screen, their chemistry was undeniable, electric in every glance, magnetic in every touch. Off-screen, their closeness fueled endless rumors. Were they more than just co-stars? Was there something deeper that the world couldn't see? Neither of them ever gave a straight answer, but the way they looked at each other seemed to reveal more than words ever could. And yet, behind the scenes, beyond the flashing lights and the crafted smiles, there were moments of heartbreak that few people knew about. Demet revealed one of those moments, and it was more painful than any fan could have imagined. The day she saw Can with someone else was not dramatic in appearance, it was not planned, not staged, not even expected. It was simple. But sometimes, simplicity hurts the most. She described the moment with haunting honesty. "I stood there. I couldn't move. My body froze. My mind screamed 1,000 thoughts, but I couldn't say a word. That is the kind of silence that is louder than any shout. That is the kind of pain that leaves scars deeper than visible wounds." To the outside world, Can Yaman was the man everyone wanted. Charismatic, handsome, adored by millions. Women across the globe dreamed of being near him. But for Demet, seeing him with another woman was not about jealousy in the ordinary sense. It was about betrayal. About the fear that what they had shared, what she thought was unique, was perhaps not as real as she believed. Fans often imagined celebrities as untouchable, above the everyday struggles of love and heartbreak. But Demet's confession proves otherwise. In that instant, she was not an actress, not a star. She was simply a woman whose heart cracked at the sight of the man she loved standing beside someone else. "It was like the air was sucked out of the room," she admitted. "I wanted to scream, but I couldn't even breathe." And perhaps the most tragic part was that she could not even ask him why. Silence became her prison. Pride held her back from confronting him. Fear held her back from showing weakness. So instead, she carried that image inside her, letting it gnaw at her in private, while in public she continued to smile. For Can, maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was innocent, a casual encounter. But for Demet, it was everything. It was the confirmation of her worst fear. That she was not the only one. That the connection she held so tightly in her heart might not have been exclusive at all. And once you see something like that, you cannot unsee it. This moment became a turning point in their story. It was no longer just about unspoken feelings, hidden chemistry, or what fans imagined behind the cameras. It was about real heartbreak, about the kind of wound that lingers even when the world moves on. After that moment, after seeing him with someone else, Demet carried a silence that was heavier than any spoken words. She admitted that her body froze, but what came afterward was even more haunting, the endless questions, the replaying of that scene over and over in her mind. Why didn't I say something? Why didn't I ask him? Why did I just stand there? These questions became her daily torment, the kind of doubts that keep you awake at night. For an actress like Demet, who had built her career on expression, on conveying emotion through words, it was ironic that in the most important moment of her own life, she found herself completely voiceless. "It was like my heart knew the answer, and that's why I couldn't speak. Because once you ask, once you put it into words, there is no going back." That is the cruel truth of love. Sometimes silence is not weakness, it is self-preservation. By not asking, by not confronting, she could still cling to the hope that maybe she had misunderstood, maybe it wasn't what it seemed. But deep down, she knew. And that is what made her freeze. The days that followed were some of the hardest she had ever lived. On set, she had to keep smiling, keep pretending. She laughed in scenes, she acted with passion, but inside, there was a hollowness. Every time she looked at him, the memory of that image flashed in her mind like a cruel shadow. She wondered if he knew she had seen. She wondered if he even cared. Fans often imagine that a relationship between stars must be glamorous, filled with luxury and admiration. But Demet revealed the opposite. For her, it was filled with insecurities, with the constant fear of not being enough. Seeing him with someone else did not just break her, it made her question everything. Was I blind? Was I the only one who believed this was real? Did I make up all the moments we shared? And yet, despite all the questions, despite all the pain, she couldn't bring herself to walk away. That is the paradox of love. Even when you feel betrayed, even when your heart is screaming, your soul still clings to the person who hurt you. Because forgetting is harder than forgiving. Demet confessed that she carried that image like a secret scar. She never told anyone at the time, not her friends, not her colleagues, not even her family. I smiled as though everything was fine. But inside, I was crumbling. That is the kind of strength people don't see. The kind of strength that comes not from being unbroken, but from hiding the broken pieces where no one can find them. And maybe the most tragic part was that she blamed herself. Instead of putting the weight on him, she carried it on her own shoulders. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe that's why he looked for something else. These words show the vulnerability that so many women feel in love, the tendency to turn pain inward, to see betrayal not as a reflection of the other person's choices, but as proof of their own inadequacy. But Demet was not inadequate. She was human. And in her humanity, she froze. Not because she was weak, but because the truth is paralyzing when it cuts too deep. What about Can? This is the question that lingers in every fan's mind. When Demet confessed, I saw him with someone else, and I froze, it raised another mystery. Did Can know she saw him? Did he realize the weight of that moment? Or was it, for him, just another passing evening, a detail forgotten as quickly as it happened? Can Yaman, to the world, has always been the picture of confidence. Bold, charismatic, a man who seems in control of every situation. But those who look closer know that behind the bravado is a man who feels deeply. And that is why this moment becomes even more complicated. Because if Demet froze, Can must have noticed. He must have seen it in her eyes, in her silence, in the sudden distance that grew between them. Some fans believe he pretended not to notice, that he buried the truth under layers of charm and distraction. But others are convinced he knew, and that the guilt of that moment never left him. Years later, in interviews, when asked about mistakes in love, Can once said, "Sometimes the things you regret most are not the fights, not the words, but the silences. The things you didn't say, the things you didn't fix when you had the chance." Many took those words as generic. But for those who know the story, they sound like an echo of that very night. If Demet froze, Can carried that freeze too. He carried it in the spaces between them, in the awkward moments where their eyes met and then quickly looked away. In the tension that no one else could see, but they both felt. And while Demet turned the pain inward, questioning herself, perhaps Can turned it into guilt, questioning whether he had destroyed something he could never rebuild. The tragedy is that neither of them spoke. Demet stayed silent out of fear and pride. Can stayed silent, maybe out of shame, maybe out of his own fear of losing her completely. And so, instead of confrontation, there was distance. Instead of answers, there was only doubt. That is how a love that could have been extraordinary slowly slipped into shadows. Some might say that for Can, being seen with someone else was just part of life in the spotlight. Women admired him everywhere he went, rumors surrounded him constantly. But the difference was this: Demet was not just anyone. She was the one person whose opinion mattered most. And if he let her believe, even for a second, that she was not enough, then that was the wound that haunted him too. Years later, his words would betray this hidden regret. In one emotional interview, he said, "You can lose many things in life. Money, success, opportunities. But when you lose someone who truly saw you, nothing replaces that. He didn't mention Demet by name. He didn't have to. For those who knew their story, the connection was clear. And so, the weight of that night did not belong to Demet alone. Can bore it too, though in his own way. She froze in silence. He froze in guilt. Two people, paralyzed by the same moment, yet separated by their inability to share the truth. Perhaps that is why their story still feels unfinished. Because it was never about the moment itself, it was about what they didn't say afterward. About how one image, one silence, became the invisible wall between them. Years passed, and still, the image never left her. Demet admitted that she carried it like a shadow, hidden behind her brightest smiles and most glamorous appearances. The night she saw him with someone else was never just a fleeting memory, it was the moment that shaped the silence between them, the unspoken words that haunted every glance they shared afterward. And yet, for so long, she kept it buried. Interviews came and went, questions about Can were asked again and again, and she always answered with diplomacy, with grace. But the truth remained locked inside her until she finally revealed it. I saw him with someone else, and I froze. Why did she freeze? Why didn't she confront him, demand answers, demand the truth? Her confession years later finally gave us the reason. Because I was afraid of hearing the answer. Afraid that what I saw was real, and once he confirmed it, I wouldn't be able to go back. As long as I stayed silent, I could pretend. I could protect myself with the illusion that maybe I was wrong. Those words are heartbreaking, because they reveal something we all understand. Sometimes silence is not weakness, it is survival. Sometimes the hardest thing is not facing the truth, but living with the uncertainty. For Demet, freezing was the only way to hold on to what little hope remained, even if that hope was fragile, even if it was false. But freezing came at a cost. That night became the invisible wall between her and Can. They continued to work together, continued to smile for the world, but deep down, something had changed. The innocence was gone. The trust had cracked. And neither of them had the courage to repair it. Can's last words in later interviews, about regrets, about silences, about losing someone who truly saw you, felt like pieces of that same puzzle. And Demet's confession, so raw and vulnerable, felt like the missing piece. Together, their words revealed a truth they both carried that night with them, long after it ended. And maybe that is why their story still fascinates us. Because it was never neatly tied up. It never had the closure fans longed for. Instead, it was left open, unfinished, lingering in the spaces between silence and confession. It was not just about love, it was about fear, pride, and the fragility of the human heart. In the end, Demet summed it up best: I froze because my heart broke faster than my words could form. And once you freeze like that, you never really thaw again. Her honesty transforms what could have been just another rumor into something timeless. A reminder that even the most glamorous stars are human, that even those who shine the brightest carry shadows within them. And as fans, we are left with the haunting image, Demet standing still, her breath caught, her heart breaking in silence, as she watched the man she loved with someone else. She froze. And in many ways, that freeze has never ended. Because some moments don't fade. Some moments live forever. And this was hers.